Hey, welcome everybody. Just waiting for the commercial at K-Talk to finish so I can start a simulcast. Welcome. Good morning to Breaking Health Barriers. And I think we can rock and roll now. All right, K-Talk, they let me back on. I guess that whatever whatever reason I am constantly left off of K-Talk maybe has been resolved. I don't know. It's a health show today. It's Wednesday. It is April the 23rd, 2025. You're listening to the Jack Stockwell Radio Talk Show program at K-Talk and Breaking Health Barriers on the stream. I got email and text yesterday from people who listen to K-Talk who still are asking how to hear what I'm doing on the stream where you can see it live. You just go to YouTube and search for Dr. Jack Stockwell, all one word, Dr. Jack Stockwell. And the stream is live there this morning. It's also on X, that Forbidden Doctor. All right, I've got a lot of stuff for you for a health program. But there is something that just has recently come in. I always want, whether I'm talking about something social, political, economic, we find the percentages break down pretty evenly, where 90% of the population, almost regardless where you go, just want to be left alone, just want to enjoy their lives, have a good time, raise their kids, kiss their grandkids, and then get ready for the great voyage in the sky. And 10% want more than that. And of the 10% of that, the 1% of the entire society, if I broke those numbers down correct, have some other ideas in mind as to how they can milk the cows, keep the cows alive long enough so they can milk them into eternity. And one of the areas where this is obviously present is in healthcare. I leave a week from today to go down to San Diego to teach 4 classes, I think. I'll be teaching 4 groups of doctors, 1 group students. And one of them is on traumatic brain injury and concussion, and how the work that we do in our clinic greatly benefits patients who have post-concussive problems with recovery. That they may have had a concussion 2-3 years ago, maybe longer than that, and they're still suffering the effects of it. And because one of the underlying recovery protocols for concussion simply hasn't been addressed in medicine, and probably never will be. And that's what we do. But because it's not active, it's not promoted. In other words, what doctors are not up on, they're down on. For instance, a lady that has a particular fibro problem with fibrocytes in the bloodstream. And that can be very dangerous because it can lead to aneurysms. Was in yesterday, and we were taking care of her issues. And one of the supplements that we recommended for her to take is something that's loaded with a food content complex known as rutin, R-U-T-I-N. Rutin comes from pea vine juice. Comes from some other places, but it comes from pea vine juice. I don't suppose a lot of you take pea vines and juice them. There's an easier way to get it. It's from a product called Cyruta, C-Y-R-U-T-A from Standard Process. It's been made for decades. There was a study that was done at the Johns Hopkins School of Medicine a number of years ago on rutin. And their conclusion on rutin was if anybody can ever learn how to synthesize rutin in the laboratory and put it into a prescribed pill, they'll be the first trillionaire on the planet. Because nothing rebuilds the walls of blood vessels like rutin does. Well, her cardiologist saw what I had recommended, and the cardiologist said, absolutely not. Absolutely not. You cannot take this. Did they look at the ingredients? No. Ah. So she came in and she wanted to return it. I said, well, listen, I can't take care of you if you're not going to do what I tell you to do. And I just kind of broke out in laughter because your cardiologist is an idiot and will probably lead to your death if you follow what they're saying. And they're, kind of shocked. I don't pull punches anymore. Your cardiologist is an idiot because what modern medicine understands about nutrition is probably less than the map they could draw from memory of the dark side of the moon. I love that analogy because they know nothing. Medicine, with all the lives that they save all the time, and believe me, if I had a crisis, I'm headed to the emergency room. I have no problem with that. The problem is when you get past the emergency room into the rest of medicine, then you're taking your life into your hands. I don't care if it's diabetes. I don't care if it's cancer. I don't care what it is, especially cardiology problems. And it goes back to Lisa Sanders, March 16th, 2003. And I've talked about this before. I'm going to talk about it again. In the New York Times Sunday magazine, the insert that's in the Sunday morning. March 16th, maybe the 13th, March 13th, 16th of 2003. And on the front cover it says, 1/2 of what your doctor knows is wrong. And she was a recent graduate of New York University's med school. She has been on many, many television programs, news, reporting medicine. And she's written many articles. She's written a couple of books, Sanders. And she talked about the white coat ceremony. And the white coat ceremony for the new incoming med students is where they don their white coats and they're addressed by the dean of the medical school. And as he's talking to them, he says, doctors, 1/2 of what you are about to learn is wrong. Unfortunately, we don't know which half. And he was dead serious. Got a few snickers and laughter until they realized he was dead serious. And so she talks about that experience. It's a matter of published record. And I think I could say the same thing about my chiropractic education. As I look back over it now, what I was taught in school, and when the dean of the medical school said 1/2 of what you're about to learn, he didn't mean the basic sciences. The basic sciences are what you learn the first 2 years of med school. They're the same classes you learn in the first 2 years of chiropractic college. The basic sciences, how the body works, how it's put together and how it works, as far as basic anatomy and physiology is concerned. So you go through histology, microbiology, and neurology, cardiology, the basic concepts. And then the last 2 years of med school, you're in the hospital. And you do a little bit in the early part, but the last 2 years is rounds in the hospital for all the different kinds of medical therapies. So you can probably, you need to get a basic understanding, but you may find what it is you want to specialize in. The last 2 years of chiropractic college, you're spending a lot of time in the public clinic. And this is where you find the technique that you're called to. That there's a lot of different techniques in chiropractic, just as there's a lot of different techniques in the various specialties of medicine. And you find a thing that just speaks to you, and that's what you do. What I do, upper cervical chiropractic, I ran across in my first semester at Palmer. And frankly, it was the only thing that made any sense to me. Does that mean the rest of them aren't any good? Well, of course not. They're very valuable. There's over 70,000 chiropractors in America today, and there wouldn't be that many if it didn't work. And in fact, it's the number one competition to drugs, is what they call manipulative therapy. I don't call it that. I refer to the work that I do as a spinal correction, because I correct the position of the spine back to its normal position relative to gravity. Very easy to do, not that difficult. In fact, a new patient that I saw yesterday is a nurse anesthetist, and she works here in the Valley. And you know, it's just it's not an anesthesiologist, but they do the same thing. And it's CRNA. You go to nursing school, and then it takes another couple of years of specialization involving anesthesia to become a nurse anesthetist. And some of you who have had surgical procedures may have had a nurse anesthetist passing the gas, not an anesthesiologist, whether you knew it or not. And so she came in because she is losing control of her fingers. Now, someone who's involved with hypodermics and all the kinds of tactical and tactile and palpable and everything involved with needles has to have a profound sense of touch. And she was referred to me by another doctor who doesn't do what I do, but this other doctor said, you need to go see Stockwell. So she came in, and I was reviewing her history, and no accidents, no injuries. And when I ask people for their you know, trauma history, they're thinking of, you know, massive car accident, unconscious, in the hospital for 6 months with traction and casts and surgery and everything else. No. Maybe I should rephrase how I actually say it, so that it doesn't sound like I'm looking into the deep mysteries. But anyway, she was in the Air Force for a while, and just during basic training. She has this, what is it, a 60-pound rucksack or whatever it is on their back. And during a particular training procedure, she slipped, fell backwards, upside down on her head. And I said, yeah, that's the kind of thing I'm talking about, because I showed on her x-ray where she had a rather hard blow to the neck a number of years ago, right in the middle of it. You can see it right between C5 and C6. The disc is almost gone, and arthritis has set in, and where the rest of the neck looked pretty good. So, which reminds me, I need to give a report back to the referring doctor. So I worked on her, and as she's walking around, she's got the same strange look on her face most people do after their first correction. Like, what's going on? And I said, well, what are you feeling? Well, I feel energy surging through me. I said, yeah, that's good. And she says, I feel so much lighter. I said, yeah, those muscles that have been spastically contracted for the last couple of decades are finally relaxing. And I said, do you feel taller? And she says, yeah, I feel taller. I said, well, you are taller. You didn't grow, your spine straightened up. And I said, how's your hands? And she said, they feel different. And I said, that's all I need to know. I just need to know they feel different. And she was scheduled for a follow-up next week. And she left just, shock isn't the right word, surprised. A shocking surprise, because they've never experienced anything like this. And they've been to many different therapies and different kinds of doctors, and her fingers are just getting to the point where they're tingling all the time, and she feels like she's starting to lose strength. And then I showed her an x-ray what would probably be causing that, but how it can change. She said, that can heal? I said, yeah, it can heal. You just have to stop what's stopping it from healing. And then there's some nutritional things you need to do to feed a disc so that the disc can recover, because it's not totally destroyed. You can't do much for a totally destroyed disc, obviously. So anyway, I'm telling you this because her shoulders leveled, her hips untwisted, she stood up straight, Her hands were evenly on each, from one thigh to the other, hands in the same place, and her head straightened up because her head was tipped off to the side. And she said, I don't understand. I said, well, I don't expect you to understand. You can give me a really in-depth aspect. I need to put K-Talk on mute for a second. So I said, you could give me a real deep explanation of some aspect of anesthesiology and how it works. And I said, I might be able to follow some of what you're saying, but I'm not going to understand it without an awful lot more understanding and investigation and research on my part. That's the same thing here. You know, you've never done this before, and but you're going to love it. And she was very grateful when she left, and like I said, I'll see her next week. That's kind of the nature of what I do. So I leave a week from today, as I said at the beginning of the program, to go down to San Diego, and I will be talking about her at the San Diego conference in relation to also the center for the Idaho basketball team, who suffered a severe concussion, knocked out right there on the floor. I have the videos that I'll take with me that shows, you know, in real time what happened to him. And his fantastic turnaround, just with one correction to the spine that I did. Some people say, well, why is this taking several of these? I said, well, look at your x-ray. Well, there's something happening at K-Talk, and I don't know what it is. That's a shame. You know, I'm about ready to quit K-Talk altogether. Something's coming across the air. And I can't hear it on my phone. I wonder if it's, I don't know what it is, but something is. Now, I don't know if I'm broadcasting at K-Talk or not. Something else was coming across there for a few minutes. And I hate interrupting the stream by trying to deal something with K-Talk. I'm sorry about that. Those of you who are listening on K-Talk again, if you'll go to YouTube and search Dr. Jack Stockwell, or go to X and search Forbidden Doctor, you can see the live presentation of what I'm doing without interruption from K-Talk. I know they have computer problems, and I'm not bad-mouthing them. It's just you do the best you can with what you have. And thank goodness to Paul Jensen and the fact that he keeps that place running, or there would be no K-Talk. All right, so back to what I was talking about with this nurse anesthetist. And so after having explained to her what I explained to you here on the stream, she just kind of floated out of the office. And that's the nature of the work that we do, is to reestablish structural balance of the head, the neck, and the spine. And it allows muscles to relax immediately. Muscles that have been super tight for years immediately relax. Now, I can get into the neurology of that, but I think it's a little too deep, and it would take too long, and I would just bore you to death. But we know why that happens. And that's another thing that's missing in medicine. In medicine, they don't relate structure to function. And as I was saying at the very beginning, at this med school, they were half of what they're about to learn is wrong. Well, I've learned a good portion of what I was taught in chiropractic college is not correct. But they need students. And they need students, and they don't teach. And it's the same thing in medical school. They don't teach to the current research. They teach to the national board exam requirements. In med school, you've got national boards, and you've got one biggie national board at the end. In chiropractic college, you have 4 national boards that take place during your education. And there's a lot of questions on that national board exam of stuff you never even heard of. But the questions come from different chiropractic colleges around the world, for that matter, to create these tests. And they're graded on a bell. So don't worry if you don't, if the other students, if you didn't know anything about this in your school, probably most of the other students don't either, and you're graded accordingly. Somehow I passed every board exam I took. At the same time, I had 6 kids at home, 2 jobs, delivering papers in the morning, selling tires and brakes at Sears at night, and full-time in school, and still managed to get out of school with a 3.5. But I know an awful lot of what I was taught about musculoskeletal physiology isn't correct. And so this all goes back to the lady who went to a doctor in Park City at the famous stuff up there and was told, do not take this supplement that I recommended that she take. And so yesterday, after I explained all of this to her, she of course took it, and it will take it, because it's the one thing that will prevent the aneurysm. It's the one thing that will prevent a hemorrhagic stroke. I don't know of anything else in the world that will do that. And it's simply a food concentrate loaded with rutin that rebuilds the walls of the arterial structures. I take 3 of them every morning. It's a part of my regular regimen. So I have gone all over the place with the show already, and I'm half an hour into it. Now I want to get to what I take. I meant to bring the whole list with me, and I didn't, because I'm often asked, Dr. Jack, what do you take? Well, you got a few minutes. You got a few minutes? Let's sit down here. In a week, I'll be 74 and a half. And I got out of bed this morning. I feel really good. My mind is clear. Plenty of energy, ready to go see a bunch of patients today. And I'm happy. And I think that's what it breaks down to is, are you happy? All right, now, I take this foundational pack of, in all of Jack's packs, we've decided to mark them down to 15%. Because there's 3 to 4 products in each one of these packs. And they're not that expensive, but they're not cheap either. They're not cheap because they're the real McCoy, and they work. And the patients of mine who take the heart support show remarkable changes in the heart scan once they start on the heart support. And we have more people now on heart support who have no cardiology symptoms whatsoever. They've never had a heart attack. They don't feel any lightheadedness when they get up and move around. There's no tightness in the chest. They can go up and down stairs just fine without being lightheaded. No pain in their left arm, no tightness in their chest, as I said. But they don't want it either. Because remember, about 50% of people who have a heart attack aren't around an hour or 2 later. And if they do survive it, a good portion of them, their life as they've known it is essentially over with. Because remember, even when the heart gets blocked with a heart attack, usually from some kind of a clot, hopefully not the widowmaker, the left descending cardiac artery, or the anterior. And when the heart is robbed of blood and it can't beat the way it's supposed to beat, just a very limited beat, all the organs in the body are suffering now from a lack of oxygen, not just the brain. And so the more I can get my patients to understand that, the more they want to come in for a scan. Doesn't cost that much, takes about a half an hour. And you can see right there in front of you your heart working. And it shows weaknesses. It'll show weakness in a valve, all four, one of the four or all four valves. It'll show weakness in the myocardium, the muscle itself. The beat isn't as strong as it should be. It will show electrical problems in the sense that the electrical charge coming from the pacemaker cells down through the septum into the lower parts of the heart to the ventricles may not be even, may not be that strong. It shows all this stuff. This device was invented back in the 1940s, 1950s, and it came on the scene about the same time the EKG became popular. And the EKG, as good as it is diagnosing what has happened to your heart, because if you think you go into the ER and you think you've had a cardiac experience, they're going to put an EKG on you immediately. And if you have in fact had a heart attack, it's going to be there like a sore thumb right there in front of you on the scan. If it wasn't a heart attack, it's going to, and you could be as sick as a dog, but if it wasn't a heart attack or you haven't had a past cardiac event, the EKG will look fine. And then that's kind of puzzling, because how can the EKG look good and I feel like hell? Well, it's something else. It's not the heart. Now, with the heart sound recorder that we use, it listens, auscultation. It's like an electronic stethoscope, and it's listening to the heart. And there are plenty of peer-reviewed journal reports that say that there is no better way to diagnose problems with the heart before you do imaging than auscultation. Just listen to it. In chiropractic college, and I'm sure it's the same thing in med school, in the early training, you get this little sound box that has all kinds of different heart sounds in it. And you put on your stethoscope and you put it on the little box and you listen. This is a preventricular contraction murmur. This is an aortic valve murmur. This is a mitral valve murmur as you're listening to them. Now, a lot of chiropractors don't do that once they get out of school. They teach us this stuff because you need to have a foundational understanding of how the human body works before they put a DR in front of your name. And we have essentially the same lab books, the same textbooks, the same cadaver dissection lab instruction that they have in med school, the same text, same tests. And so I loved my education to learn about the human body as I did. And I loved learning about the heart. You spend about 3.5 months studying the heart in school. Like you spend about 3.5 months studying the kidneys. I mean, who knew there was that kind of information? And so you get a pretty good idea when you come out of school how the body's working. And Dr. Royal Lee, the founder of Standard Process, was the one who invented the heart sound recorder. And it's just a special device, a special microphone that we put a strap around your chest and put the microphone over the top of the 4 valves. And then we record its function and its activity. And one of the great things about it is that once we see where the problem is, where it's showing weakness or stress, we have you chew up a few supplements that are aimed at taking care of that problem. And you chew them up and you wait about 15, 20 minutes and then retest. And you can see an immediate improvement in the function of the heart muscle or the valve that was showing weakness. You can see an immediate improvement on this device, whereas you can't do that with an EKG. An EKG only shows if something has happened. In other words, you could go into the ER thinking there's something wrong with your heart. They do maybe even do a 12 lead, a really big EKG scan. And it showed, no, we can't see anything. The heart looks good. And the very next day, 24 hours later, you could drop dead of a massive heart attack because it doesn't see what's coming. It just sees what's happened. With this heart sound recorder, we can see what's coming. And we have dietary recommendations. You need to stop this. You need to start this. And these supplements here will take care of the problem for you if you're really religious about taking them. Well, I have to take all these pills? Not if you eat better. I want you to eat about a 4-ounce piece of liver twice a week. I can't stand that. Okay, I've got liver in a pill here. It's one or the other. And especially, and I've said to a couple of families, I said, I can sugarcoat this. Tell you go ahead, keep eating those donuts, keep eating those bagels. You'll be just fine. Or I can tell you the truth. You're headed for trouble. You're headed for serious trouble. And considering the fact that your brother died of a heart attack and 2 uncles have died of heart attacks, you might want to consider this. And I tell you, I just love what I do because every now and then somebody comes along that gets it, that understands what prevention is all about. Which is hard to do. Our economy doesn't support a bunch of luxurious things like eating better. And there's the stress of the families, there's the political stress that's going on, the tariffs, and although I heard on the news this morning, Trump's going to start backing off on some of his tariff positions, thank goodness. There's a piece of equipment that I'm thinking about getting for my x-ray, a hospital-grade digital system. And the people that I've been talking to about getting it just told me yesterday, be prepared for a 10% increase in cost if you don't get it right away because the tariffs are going to add 10% to it. Now, all of a sudden, the tariffs are very personal to me. All right, so I have gone on for almost 40 minutes now. I haven't really talked about what I planned on talking about on the show, but I hope you're getting the idea here. The thing is, you hear the statement, you are what you eat. You are what you absorb. It's not just what you eat. You can eat all kinds of stuff. It's what your body does with what you eat that makes the difference. All right. Canadian Health Agency. This is something that I just picked up yesterday, and very fascinating. Of a Freedom of Information report from the Canada's Public Health. And I'm going to quote from it here liberally because the takeaways. Well, I'm going to quote this here. The tragic died suddenly phenomenon is real, and Canada's Public Health Agency has been tracking it. The shock of an unexpected death is particularly painful and confusing for the victim's family and friends. Just lost another friend this week. That's 4 people, essentially in my age group, since last November that have died. 2 of them from massive heart problems. No, 3 of them from heart problems. 1 from a stage 4 bowel cancer that just died earlier this week. And as a personal friend, I've known him for years, and he was diagnosed with bowel cancer a number of years ago. And he came to us, is there anything you can do? I said, yeah, these enzymes. Will that cure it? No, it's not going to cure it, but it's going to keep you around for a lot longer. There's other things that can cure your bowel cancer, but these enzymes will certainly help you defeat the problem that you're struggling with at the level you have it right now. So he's been taking my enzymes for years. And then some well-meaning person came along and said, you need massive amounts of ascorbic acid. And the worst thing you can do with cancer is to feed it synthetic vitamin C. Because ascorbic acid is an antioxidant. It stops oxidation. the natural killer cells and the cells of your immune system that kill cancer operate on an oxidative basis. And it's very interesting how a cancerous tumor, a metastatic tumor, on pathological dissection, on autopsy, will show a massive amount of ascorbic acid in pockets that surround the tumor. And so, without knowing or understanding why that is, you would think, the ascorbic acid is there attacking the cancer. No. The cancer is using the ascorbic acid as a shield to protect itself from oxidizing aspects of the immune system. So somebody convinced him to take very high doses, I mean grams, every day of ascorbic acid. And now he's gone. A personal friend. Now, back to this Canada Health thing. It says an access to information, their Freedom of Information Act, filed May 2024, a year ago, has now yielded thousands of pages of internal reporting, literature reviews, emails, as well as 19 spreadsheets with adverse event data. And it just came out now in April 2025, a year later, it was finally released. And the order, well, let me just get into, I'm just going to give you the takeaways. This is from the Commissioner of Health, the Commissioner of Public Health Canada. Their full report. These are the takeaways from the full report. The government maintains a non-password protected database housing an impressive 22,000 scientific papers and counting about COVID vaccines, much of which are on adverse events. Negative efficacy. In the database is a 2023 study by Cleveland Clinic researchers published in Oxford Academic Press, which proves, quote, the risk of COVID-19 also increased with the number of vaccine doses previously received. That is, more injections equal more infections. This landmark study negates any possible justification for the morbidity and mortality caused by COVID vaccines. Now, Health Canada staff were alarmed by Florida's decision to stop recommending COVID vaccination for young males in October of 2022. One staffer's response, yikes. I mean, that was written in the report. A Health Canada myocarditis data review through June of that year showed a 24x elevated risk among Canadian girls aged 5 to 11. No action was taken. Staff casually email each other with regular updates of the vaccine death tally. No action taken to date. Dennis Rancourt et al.'s 2023 report, which attributed 17 million global excess deaths to the COVID vaccine program, caused a stir at Health Canada. The report was shared with all provincial and territorial health authorities, as well as with the military and the RCMP. Health Chief Teresa Tam asked for analysis of the report. It was deemed not credible, and no action taken. By mid-2022, of the 206 death reports accumulated by Health Canada, 163, or 79%, had occurred within 30 days of the injection. No action taken. As early as October 2021, Health Canada determined that among 195 fatal reports, the median time of death following injection was just 7 days. No action taken. Health Canada filters out death reports before proper assessment. January 2023, 300, this is what Health Canada said, 300 is just too many deaths to investigate. We need criteria to determine what should be looked at. Sudden death would be looking at deaths that can't otherwise be explained, heart attack, stroke, etc., almost a definition of exclusion. Someone found dead with no apparent cause or underlying condition. It's just too many deaths to investigate. Imagine a police report like that. Yes, we've had 17 murders this week. That's just too many to investigate. We'll look at one or two of them. And then the Brighton collaboration. World Health Organization guidelines and causality algorithms are used to ignore hundreds of Canadian deaths, which have already been aggressively whittled down by provincial territorial authorities, despite the fact that most COVID vaccine deaths in federal databases occur within a week of injection. Over 2,000 pages, the package proves comprehensive and wide range of dangerous, even fatal, adverse reactions. What they call AEFI, adverse events following immunization, both in literature and across Canada, 2,000 pages of these things. And as of the writing, which is this week, the feds still publicly assert all COVID-19 vaccines authorized in Canada are proven safe, effective, and of high quality. Just like we have down here. The CDC still recommends the COVID vaccine. And as such, people will still, because some government agency recommended that these things are safe and effective, the public will, without a thought to themselves, because they worship the white coat, will just go ahead and do it because it's been declared safe and effective. You see, Bobby Kennedy Jr. wants to take the COVID vaccine out of the recommended shots for children. One of the main reasons is because children don't get COVID unless they have serious comorbidities going on. So they're already sick. Then they might have COVID, and that could, of course, lead to more serious complications. Now, I've got another vaccine report from the Lioness of Judah Ministries. A pathologist named Fabio Zoffi, in his peer-reviewed report, terrifying, mRNA vaccines cause personality changes. Pineal gland was completely destroyed. So I want to talk about that for a second here before I get into some other subjects. And I think you'll find this interesting. Oh, and I got a text about how to get a consultation with me. You just call the office, 801-523-1890. Tell them you heard me on the radio or on the stream, whatever. Or maybe you've had some friends recommend us. And they will schedule you for essentially a half-hour consultation. There's no obligation, there's no charge. If you decide after the consultation, if I decide you're not so much in the wrong office, but I really can't help what your problem is, or you decide you don't want me to take care of you, we'll still be friends. There won't be any charge. You can take off and go. Or if you want to stay, then I will take care of you. And of course, at that point, there will be a fee. Every bit as much as you charge your employer a fee for your work at the office. Now, this top Italian pathologist has raised the alarm after discovering that COVID mRNA vaccines have completely destroyed the pineal gland of recipients, causing widespread personality changes. Now, I've had patients report this, where they said, they've heard me on the radio, or they've heard from other sources. These shots cause myocarditis, right? Yeah, that's what the research out there is indicating, inflammation of the heart muscle. Inflammation, of course, leads to scarring. You don't want scars in your heart muscle because they don't heal. Then the heart continues to weaken, and then you'll be leaving this life earlier than you planned. And then others will say, not as often, in all honesty, not as often, but I've heard some of them say, he's not the same. And of course, whenever somebody comes in and talking about a family member not being the same, and I hear this from time to time, my first thought is invasion of the body snatchers. That happens very early in the movie. Well, little Tommy here says that his grandfather's not the same. He's not the same person, or his father's not the same person. Oh, he's just a kid, and that kind of stuff. But no, I'm hearing this from people now. And my first question is, did they get the jab? Yeah, they did. Now, this pathologist's discovery was revealed by Fabio Zolfi, the founder of Zero Spike. You can Google this for yourself. Zero Spike is an organization researching the toxicity and the detoxification of spike proteins that are found in the mRNA vaccines. So he described this Italian pathologist's discovery showing spike proteins damage the pineal gland. Now, when you get this shot that creates spike proteins, that's the whole idea behind it. The whole idea behind the COVID-19 vaccine was to create a vaccine inside of you, in the sense that your cells will produce this spike protein that ends up on the outside of the cell, and your immune system sees it, builds antibodies to it, and now you have resistance to COVID-19 or SARS-CoV-2 virus. That's the theory. The problem is there's no shutoff for the cells that are making spike proteins, and they end up in the blood, and they end up passing throughout the body. And there are some tissues we know have a greater affinity for the spike protein than other tissues. The heart, the ovary, the testicle, and in this report, the pineal gland. So during Public Health Alliance roundtable discussion, Zoffi told a group of researchers, I want to add also a comment about the change in personality, depression, and all these things. This is very real, he said. And we have identified the reasons from the theory, and some doctors in Italy have. Some pathologists have confirmed that the spike protein unfortunately attacks and destroys the endocrine system. So the glands producing hormones, and hormones are what make our emotions and feelings and all these things. And so an Italian pathologist near Venice went on a newspaper telling that all the brains he had investigated, he found the pineal gland was completely destroyed in all the people who were vaccinated. Only all of them. So the spike protein is very dangerous for the endocrine system. That's why people have these changes in personality. These findings appear to reaffirm previous studies that linked major personality changes in people to the COVID mRNA vaccines. As SLAY, S-L-A-Y, SLAY News previously reported, a major study provoked concerns about mRNA vaccines after researchers confirmed that COVID injections changed the emotions of those who receive them. Now, I wasn't aware it was this bad, but I was aware it was happening because of reports from my patients. I remember early in my chiropractic education, an instructor saying, listen to your patients. Your patients will make it very clear what the problem is, and your patients will make it very clear what you need to do about it. But listen to them. In other words, now that you've got a DR in front of your name, don't suppose that you're the big, high and mighty healer. All you have is a DR and you pass some tests. You need about 20 to 30 years of experience before you're a real doctor. And I still remember where I was sitting in the classroom when the instructors over 2 rows from the left, about halfway up the classroom size or room, because that shocked me. Listen to the patient. Oh my goodness, I was so naive. Yeah, listen to the patient. The patient will tell you what the problem is and probably what needs to be done. Because once a patient explains the pathology that they're experiencing, and they ask your opinion, what should I do about it? I always ask the same question. What do you think you should do? And listen, because they probably have the answer, coupled with what I might add. So anyway, the study goes on here. Leading researchers in South Korea confirmed that the injections are altering human behavior. The troubling study found that people's emotions, personalities, feelings, fears, stress levels, mental well-being, and general outlook changed after they were injected with the vaccine. The peer-reviewed study, which included over 2 million participants, was published in the renowned Nature journal. The study was led by Professor Hong Jin Kim of the Department of Orthopedic Surgery at the Inje University Sangay Paik Hospital and the College of Medicine at Inje University in Seoul, Republic of Korea. The researchers confirmed that the COVID injections are responsible for increasing global reports of major personality and behavioral changes in people in the last 4 years. They explained that the vaccines cause psychiatric manifestations among the vaccinated. The study found that these psychiatric changes resulted in spikes in mental health disorders. Patients described feelings of inner turmoil, fear, dread, and depression. The study found that COVID shots triggered 68% spike in depression, 44% increase in anxiety disorders, and a 94% surge in sleep disorders. Looks like, all right, maybe the news hasn't started there yet. The researchers recruited 50% of the Seoul resident population, making it one of the largest studies into COVID vaccines to date. I was glad to have discovered this, as it helped to explain some of the oddities that some of my patients are reporting about themselves as well as family members. This is probably the greatest, I want to say mistake. All right, I got to go. I put on mute at the radio station. Now it's just you and me on the stream. I think the only thing greater than the horror of the side effects of these vaccines is the fraud that was behind it. For something that was nothing more than a cold and flu problem. Now, I'm not going to get into the politics of what I think was behind this. I'll save that for some other show. But for us, here, at least those of you who are here with me on the stream, this explains a lot. And more of this information is coming out all the time, obviously. This report I'm giving you was just released yesterday. And if you go to, well, it's a Substack thing, Lioness of Judah Ministry. You can read it and get the data and the percentages and the numbers for yourself. Lioness of Judah Substack. Lioness of Judah Ministry. So, well, there's I don't see anything coming across the screen at KTalk. So I can go on here with the rest of what I want to talk about. No, I can't. There it is. The news was running a little late, or the other thing was a little early, whatever. So, several more things about this shot, because it hasn't gone away. Now, as I said earlier in the hour, Bobby Kennedy Jr. wants to take it out of the schedule for children because, for one thing, there's terrible side effects, and children don't get COVID unless they've got some serious comorbidities. I mean, the percentage was something like 0.0005 or something like that. In other words, there might be, out of 10,000 children, or 100,000 children, there might be 5 of them that got COVID to a serious enough degree that there were some serious consequences. Well, you don't inoculate the 10,000 that are going to suffer serious side effects, many of them, for the 5 that are already sick. And of course, you know, I mean, when you hear the parable of Jesus about leaving behind the 99 and going after the one, that's different. The 99 are just fine by themselves and don't need to be shepherded. They're just fine as you go after the one lost lamb. That's quite a bit different when you risk the 99 by injecting all of them to save the one that theoretically might be saved by what you're doing. All right. Now, let me talk about, well, kids' issues, because I am taking care of a 12-year-old girl. I took care of a 14-year-old girl yesterday. I'm taking care of a 12-year-old girl for migraines. And one thing that's similar is trauma. Their mothers have been listening to the show for a long time, and the kids are on a pretty good diet. And the children take Catalin for children. It's just adult Catalin. It just has a drop of cherry juice in it to sweeten it up so they can chew it up. In fact, it's in the children's support pack. Chewable Catalin, chewable Conjuplex, chewable tuna fish oil that's orange flavored, and kids don't seem to have any problem with that. And to keep their immune systems on top notch, because these kids, gee whiz, you know, I can understand some of the frustration Bobby Kennedy Jr. must be going through, trying to get concepts, true concepts of health and healing across to the public, wanting to turn the food pyramid upside down, rah for that one. But because of all of the ingredients that there are no toxicology studies for that are in our processed and highly processed foods, that makes up a significant portion of children's diets. So not only are they being poisoned by these ingredients, their satiety, you know, they eat this stuff and their hunger satisfied, and they're not getting nutrition. So they're suffering from malnutrition. I can see it in their eyes, I can see it in their skin, I can see it in their hair, and they're barely into puberty. And I see their bodies already starting to fall apart. So if you've ever stopped to wonder when you start looking at these statistics, why our children are getting sicker and having more serious health issues than children did just a generation ago. But when you go back several generations, and I've always used the example of Butch, I did it last week, I'm not going to do it again, a kid in my 5th grade, was the only person who was sick that I was aware of. Now, it was a small elementary school down in Lexington Park, St. Mary's County, down in southern Maryland. There were 2 or 3 grades for 1st grade. I think there were 2 grades for 2nd. And then from the 3rd on up, there was just 1 grade for each of the grades. And I was there from 4th, 5th, and 6th grade. And so I knew an awful lot of these kids, and I knew an awful lot of these people. And this poor boy was the only one who was really sick. Today, my goodness, I just took care of a newborn baby. Was it I guess it was Monday morning, a brand newborn baby from a lady that I have been taking care of for years. It was her first child. And her mother is a massage therapist and very into health and healing and nutrition. And her mother's a patient, been a patient even longer. And so this young mother had a wonderful prenatal supplement program and a good prenatal diet, eating the right kinds of foods, staying away from the other stuff. Remember, there's the placental barrier. About the only thing the placental barrier in a developing baby protects that baby from is the blood. Mama's blood doesn't get into the baby, baby's blood doesn't get into the mama. If that happens, there's some very, very serious problems that sometimes can happen at birth, but it's kind of rare. But everything else goes across that barrier. And so when I think about how sick children are today, when I find someone who is pregnant or considering pregnancy, man, I don't read the Riot Act. I just have a very, very serious conversation with them. And so this mother's diet was very, very good, and she's been under spinal care from me for years. So she goes in for her into labor and delivery, and the amniotic sac doesn't rupture, so they rupture it because she's starting to have contractions. And 3-hour labor. And the transition from 6 to 10 centimeters for the cervix dilation was about 45 minutes. And they kept saying to her, "This is amazing. This is remarkable. Usually it doesn't happen like this. This is usually the first, labor can be hours and hours." And so when I talked to the mother when I was checking the baby, and the baby was just an absolute example of supreme postnatal health. Great reflexes, even the eyes showing reflexive actions. The arms and legs, reflexes. Muscle tone already, and the baby was, I think, 3 days old. Good hip structure, good strong hip structure. And the basic neurologic tests showing that the baby is wired really well from brain to foot. And when I see this, I feel like I've done some good in the world. And because if they hadn't met us, I don't know that that baby would be as healthy as it is. And of course, no injections. While I suggested that the mother really study the pros and cons of vaccines and make her own mind up, her mother, of course, was even more vocal about it than me. But the daughter, the new mother who just gave birth to her daughter, was already schooled on the subject and insisted absolutely. Even the vitamin K shot. Nope, no thank you. As more and more mothers are suggesting now at birth anyway. Which begs the question, if the COVID-19 vaccine is so terribly dangerous, What about the rest of them? And that's something that they wanted to use to hold up Bobby Kennedy Jr.'s nomination, was they were accusing him of wanting to stop all vaccines. And he never said that. And to this day, he hasn't said that. He said, we just want safety studies. And then the average ignorant person, ignorant not in the sense of, I don't mean something nasty about that, ignorant in the sense that they don't know any better, immediately assumes, well, of course there's safety studies. No, there aren't. You know why they don't do safety studies on vaccines? Because there's no liability. Because of the 1986 Vaccine Safety Act. Vaccine Safety Act. So the vaccine companies were, given a pass. You can't be sued. Now go make those vaccines. And of course, the vaccine schedule just exploded at that time. So oh yeah, we did some in-house safety studies. Yeah, sure. So have you ever wondered why these kids are getting sicker and sicker around us? Look at the autism figures that just came out Monday. My goodness. 20 years ago, it was 1 in 10,000. 1950, it was 1 in 100,000 with autism. Now, in California, for boys, it's 1 in 12. And the ridiculous medical excuse is, oh, we have better ways of diagnosing it now. You ever been in a store or some public gathering at church, a game, a sports game, whatever, family reunions, a day in the park, whatever, and seen a child with autism? You can see it from across the field. Now, there's a spectrum. Some of them are very bad off and nonverbal, and they love to throw their feces around the room. And my heart breaks, those parents, what they must be going through. I know one marriage it destroyed. They couldn't stay married any longer. Up to where they are slowly integrating into society because, well, maybe it's not autism. Maybe it's Asperger's, a lesser degree. But you know autism when you see it. And so Kennedy is saying, well, we're going to find out what causes autism. We're going to find out what causes autism. And when you see the autism incidence on a graph follow the additional number of shots the kids are given, you'd have a strong temptation to say, well, it's the shots that cause autism. But there are kids who don't get shots that get autism. Does that mean the shots don't? No, the shots are just one other causative factor because there's all these poisons that are in our diet, that are in their foods. These dyes in the breakfast cereals. Now, breakfast cereals is junk food anyway. I mean, you might as well feed them Pop-Tarts. I mean, if you're feeding your child breakfast cereal, you got to stop, and you got to start feeding them food for breakfast. But besides that, the color dyes, and so Kennedy makes a big deal about that. The dyes that are in children's cereal here in America are not in the Canadian cereals. So it's a well-established fact that malnutrition can cause changes in the body, the human body, that are transmitted to offspring. We have seen that in post-war studies, World War I, World War II, where massive malnutrition followed. They saw it in the Balkans. I think they're going to definitely see it in the aftermath of Gaza, if any Palestinians survive to study, where a generation that is starving and whatever food they get is processed in ultra-processed foods, it causes morphological changes in the body itself that that our gametes, our seeds, our eggs and our sperm cells are affected negatively by malnutrition and poisons in our food. That's been well established, and that will pass on to the next generation. In other words, you have a mother and a father, or one or the other, where the egg is not very healthy or the sperm cells are not very healthy. And because one of the parents has either had a horrible diet, been malnourished, or been poisoned, some job-related thing, or came from a parent who was also malnourished. Now they're passing it on to the next generation. And it's going to affect brain development and learning ability, speech ability, intelligence of the next generation. Now, one of the good things about that is that they found out that can be reversed. It doesn't have to stay that way. So when you look at the history of this country's food quality, and you see the decline in it, and you see the growing apparent presence of nutritional deficiency diseases, diabetes, obesity, these are nutritional deficiency diseases. Neurological problems, reproductive problems. You'll also see that there's been a tremendous increase in exposure to toxic substances, not just vaccines. Now, I think I mentioned last week a report that came out 2 months ago from the National News Desk from a Dr. Philip Landrigan, who's a pediatrician. And this just came out 2 months ago. In the last 50 years, so that would be 1975 till now, childhood cancer is up 35%. Pediatric asthma has gone up 300%. And today, 1 in 6 kids is affected by some neurodevelopmental disorder, which would include autism. And there are more than 350,000 synthetic chemicals and plastics in the world, and production is expected to triple in the next 25 years. That would be 1 million synthetic chemicals. And at the time this came out, 80% of them have never been tested. Now, not only were his statistics troubling, we found some additional statistics that caused some concern. In the 1960s, only 13% of Americans were obese. What is that? That's 45 years ago? 65 years ago. Only 13 out of 100 Americans were obese. The current rate is 43 out of 100. It's tripled. Childhood obesity went from 5% in 1970 to 19% in 2020, 400% increase. Between 2017 and 2021, 4 years, anxiety issues increased by 31%. Between 2017 and 2021, depression increased 60%. And the suicide rates from 2008 to 2020 have increased 16%. Not to mention the infectious diseases and new diseases showing up all over the place. Now, these genetic changes that occur in one generation to the next, that follows one unhealthy parent to the unhealthy child to the next unhealthy generation. This kind of malnutrition, we're going to find more arthritis, more cancer, and more sterility, the inability to reproduce. As heartbreaking as that is, the options that are given in patients that I've taken care of that came in because of infertility, you know, they're currently doing IVF or they're trying IVF or IVF failed, and they are considering adoption or they don't want to adopt. They want to do whatever else is necessary that they can have their own child. I remember in my first marriage, when my wife, we found that we were pregnant, I was so excited. I was so happy. I thought, this is great. Now we're a family. All right, there's something on the radio. And I think about people who can't have that experience, what that must be like. Now, we've been able to help a lot of ladies who haven't been able to conceive. We stopped counting after 200 because a lot of times it's just a neurological connection. They don't, you know, infertility clinics don't talk about that stuff because they don't know about it. But we've been able to help just through the spinal correction, the atlas correction, been able to help a lot of ladies conceive that couldn't otherwise conceive. But when you look at the staggering numbers of infertility that's taking place and the head scratching that goes on relative to it because they can't figure out why that problem exists, I always point to malnutrition. So when we do the heart scan, the heart sound recorder that I talked about in the first hour, sorry, something's playing at K-Talk. When they see, I show them what the scan's supposed to look like. And then I show them what their scan looks like. And they want, well, how'd that happen? Or they'll say, but I feel good. Yeah, you feel good until you don't. You're upright, moving around, having a great time, and you will until you don't, if you continue on the path you're on. Well, how'd that happen? And I tell them, you know, unless you had parents with serious heart disease problems, or you had heart disease problems as a child, and as a child that might be reflective of something that's going to happen as an adult as well. But unless these things are happening, it's malnutrition. You know, the foods we choose to eat today are based on, for the most part, convenience. So you're racing off to a soccer game. Don't worry, you didn't get time to get breakfast. We'll stop and get something at McDonald's on the way. That's not breakfast. That's junk food, and it will be harmful for them. Or, and I'm not saying this in a judgmental. I'm just saying this in an observational point of view. This is what people do. Out of convenience, they'll make food choices. Now, I'm going to make something that I saw and was very, very impressed with. I'm going to make it this weekend for me. And it's a roasted organic chicken on a cacciatore bed of red, gold, and green peppers, green olives, onions, whole cloves of garlic, carrots, and heavy marinara sauce, and an organic chicken stuffed with a lemon and a sprig of rosemary and coated with salt and pepper and olive oil, and the chicken fat and the olive oil infusing with the marinara and the sweetness of the carrots and the onions is going to be an incredible chicken cacciatore. And I'm going to cook it in my cast iron frying pan in the oven. And it's going to be served on a bed of steaming basmati rice and garnished with curls of Parmesan. That is food. That you can't stop at McDonald's and get. You have to make it, and it takes time to do it. Oh, and did I mention the bacon? Several pieces of bacon draped over the chicken while it's baking in the oven at 350 degrees for about an hour. Oh, I can taste it now. I'll have to tell you how it turns out. But I can't wait to do that because it's real food. And as I do an audit of my life, there's a lot of fast stuff in my life that I know what it's like. You get stuck with time, you're hungry, or you got a car full of kids and they're hungry, and you don't have time to go home and make a meal that takes a half an hour to an hour. Now, there's ways around that. You prepare things in advance, especially on the weekend. You prepare things that stick in the fridge till you're ready to throw it in the oven, and it's all prepared ahead of time. And we're a lot of families where both parents work. I understand there's a difficulty in time management. Believe me, I understand that. But the health of these children and your coming grandchildren depend on what you feed them now. Is there anything else you can do? Yeah, the Children's Health Pack. The foundational pack for kids. I have it right here. And it involves chewable Catalin, chewable Conjuplex, chewable tuna oil for children. They don't need a whole lot, but it covers all the nutritional bases as far as vitamins, minerals, and enzymes are concerned. All right. I want to get into something else. I've talked enough about this was given to me about the mitochondria fighting infections, calming the autoimmune storms. Macrophages, macro meaning big, phage meaning eat. The macrophages are the Pac-Man of the bloodstream. Chomp, 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 chomp. They show up and they clear out germs, they clear out dead tissue, they clear out things that are not supposed to be there, they digest them, and help to control inflammation while doing that. The mitochondria are the power cells of the cells, and they actually signal the macrophages to manage inflammation. And it's really fascinating how all of this works, because without you even thinking about it, right now in this moment, whether you are awake or not, there is a tremendous amount of industry going on inside your body, inside the cells, and then inside the organs. And they are constantly at work. Like I said, whether you're asleep or awake, these things are constantly working, and they need energy. They need decent food for them to do their job. But their job is controlling inflammation and controlling the infections process, and they work in conjunction with one another, the macrophage and the mitochondria. And as I said, the mitochondria is the energy factories of the body. They're the ones that are producing ATP, adenosine triphosphate, which is the gasoline of the human body. Your thyroid is the gas pedal of the human body, but the ATP is the gasoline. And the more ATP and the more efficiently your body can make it, the more energized you're going to be. Now, you've got this part of your immune system, these policemen called macrophages. And they've been compared to like part janitor, part security guard. They're constantly on the flow, they're in the bloodstream, they're in the lymph tissue, gobbling up germs and viruses, and cleaning up the debris after a cut or a bruise, but they don't stop there. They play a very, very strong role, big role in your immune system. Because when something invades, like a cold virus, the macrophages swoop in to eat it up. They're your first line of defense, keeping whatever pathogens have invaded the body in check. And what is their secret weapon? Macrophages release a helper for the other parts of the immune system called IL-10. It's like an all-clear signal. It tells the immune system to back off once the danger's done. This is important because it stops inflammation from going overboard. Now, you know, if you were paying attention during the COVID crisis, regardless of what you think about its legitimacy, there were things that were called cytokine storms, and there were things where it seemed like the immune system started to attack the body instead of the SARS-CoV-2 virus. When you have tight communication between the mitochondria and the macrophages, the mitochondria help to call the macrophages to work, and the mitochondria tell the macrophages to back off and go home and take a nap. Inflammation is like a fire alarm. It's loud and it grabs attention when you need to fight off the invaders. Not just the systemic type of inflammation or cellular inflammation, but you know, most of the people that I saw yesterday in my clinic came in because of pain. Some pain returned, or there was some new pain. Some of these people I haven't seen in a while. Some of them I've just begun taking care of them. And when that pain is present, you're kind of compelled to do something about it. Sometimes you think, well, it'll go away on its own, which is true. Sometimes it will. Sometimes it doesn't. And for those people, they kind of make a decision, is this something I can live with? And who wants to live with pain? Or do I got to go see Dr. Jack? So when it grabs your attention, it needs to be taken care of. Now, the other kinds of inflammation, cellular inflammation, or inflammation that begins to show up in the tissues or the lymph, when that inflammation is going off like a fire alarm that gets your brain's attention so that your body starts handling it and does something about it, that alarm needs to go off. It can't keep running. Just like a fire alarm goes off at your workplace or at the school or in your home. You know, it gets your attention, you do something about it, and then once you've done something about it, you need the alarm to turn off. And that's where, you know, and even in the immune response, even after the macrophages have done their job, the alarm could still be going off because of some weakness in the mitochondria. And this is where you start flirting with autoimmune diseases. Because when inflammation in a particular organ continues, you start to get a big die-off of the cells of that organ. And that die-off of those cells end up in the lymph. Hopefully they never show up in the blood. Usually they show up in the lymph, which is an ongoing running sewer system inside your body. Lymph brings nutrition and oxygen to a lot of cells in the body, but it's also like the sewer underneath the street that's constantly, whatever falls down in the drains along the street gets carried away by the sewer. Your lymph is also doing that. And when you have a big die-off because of continued inflammation taking place in an organ, you have a big die-off of those cells. Those cells have to go somewhere. Now, in the normal course of events, like right now, my beating heart or my spleen or my liver or my pancreas, there are cells dying every second in my body as new cells come to take their place. It's called apoptosis. It's the timed life cycle of a cell. Cells are designed to live a certain period of time, and then they are programmed to die. What happens sometimes when stem cells become cancerous is the stem cell doesn't become like the host cell that it's supposed to be, a stem cell in the liver that's supposed to become a liver cell. Dysregulation can show up, and that stem cell becomes a cancer cell, and the apoptosis effect is gone. It doesn't die when it's supposed to. It just gets bigger and grows and spreads and gets bigger and grows and spreads until you have a life-threatening condition with liver cancer. Now, you have in the system helper cells that know how to, once the fire alarm stops, to clean up the mess. You have helper cells that know when to turn off the fire alarm, and it's called IL-10. And it's an all-clear signal. And it tells your immune system, all right, we can stop the immune response now. The danger's gone. And this is important. It keeps inflammation from going overboard. And the problem is, this IL-10, if you have adequate amounts of it, will stop an autoimmune disease from forming because, as I was saying, when you have major die-off of a particular type of tissue, a heart attack that's going to have a big die-off, liver inflammation, hepatitis, some serious infection in the kidney, some serious infection in the intestinal tract, whatever. You have a big die-off of these cells, they start showing up in larger numbers, a greater presence in the lymph or the bloodstream than the normal die-off pattern would allow. And your immune sees it. The immune system sees this as an enemy. You end up with active proteins in the bloodstream, which is an absolute no-no. There can be no active proteins in the bloodstream. Why? Because that active protein could end up somewhere else and trigger tissue growth. The worst thing that can possibly happen in the human body, and they've known this since 1903 when it was discovered, is the DNA of a particular cell getting out of that cell and into the bloodstream and taking root somewhere else. You do not want a heart growing inside of the liver. You do not want a liver growing inside of the ovary. Now, as crazy as that sounds, it's happened. And so the immune system, its biggest alarm is when DNA breaks down, gets free, and gets loose in the body. Now, you have DNA everywhere anyway, but it's encapsulated inside of a nucleus, inside of a cell. There it's fine for the DNA to do what it's supposed to do, but you don't want it turning loose. Or you're going to end up with the body attacking the source of all those dead cells showing up, and that's what autoimmune diseases are, where the body attacks itself. Now, I'm telling you all of this, that this is one of the side effects of malnutrition, of not having adequate nutritional support for the cell's proper function, for the mitochondria to produce enough energy, for the macrophages to do their cleanup job. But mitochondria do an awful lot more than just make energy. They are command centers, and they command macrophages to turn on and turn off. Why is that important? Because you don't want macrophages out there eating stuff they're not supposed to be eating. And without these signals, the macrophages can't do their full job. It's not just a power, it's about control. And when that control slips, inflammation goes crazy. And when an inflammation gets to a certain point, autoimmunity can show up. So what do I recommend for that? Just the basic the basic foundation pack, the basic thing that I take. I take several things every morning, but I don't take everything every day. I take everything every week. So from Sunday to Saturday, I will have taken everything in my entire supply that I take, which is about, as I look over there on the counter, probably close to 30 supplements. Do I overdo it? Yeah, maybe. But I feel pretty damn good. But I don't take that much every day. But what I do take every day is in my foundational pack. It's Ageless Thyroid that feeds my emotional system, which is why I think I'm pretty evenly keeled. I have crises just like you do, but I think I handle them okay without going to pieces. And I have moments of great happiness and fulfillment without, dancing like dancing in the rain around or around light posts in the middle of a rainstorm, although I have felt that happy in the past. But I'm a pretty happy, easygoing guy because I want my hypothalamus, my pituitary, my thyroid, and my adrenal glands fed so that when stress happens, my adrenals can jump into action and calm the day. I want my thyroid producing enough T4 that's going to get converted to, I want that free T4 in my system so I can have plenty of T3, which is the active form of thyroxine. T4 is the storage, T3 is reacts better, to make sure that all my cells have thyroxine. Because as I said, that's the gas pedal of the body. When I don't have enough of that, I slow down. When I have too much of it, hey, Jack, what's gotten into you? And I don't want that either. I want an even keel, as they say. And so because ageless thyroid feeds my hypothalamus, my pituitary, my thyroid, and my adrenals, I have what I would consider a good, strong emotional balance. And then I take Catalin. And Catalin is the flagship product of Standard Process. It's been around since 1929. All the vitamins, all the minerals, and some very important enzymes on a basic level so that I never have to worry about malnourishment in the sense of vitamins and minerals. Then there is trace minerals, B12, so that I know that there's a little bit more of some of the more important minerals. Remember, your body works based on minerals. We always hear about vitamins. We don't always hear about minerals. The vitamin's job is to bring a mineral into a chemical reaction inside the body. There are places in the body that need a lot of calcium. There's places that need a lot of potassium, especially the heart. Well, the heart needs a balance between calcium and potassium to speed it up, to slow it down, to speed it up, to slow it down. Your pituitary needs magnesium. They need all these things, but some of the different organs need a little bit more of a particular mineral. And the vitamins that we take bring that mineral into a chemical reaction inside that tissue to affect the certain outcome that we're looking for. So it's important that minerals are there as well, and in trace minerals B12, there's an extra dose of B12, cyanocobalamin. And B12 can only come from an animal source. If there are no animal foods in your diet, you're going to have to supplement B12. And B12 does a lot of things, but one of the most important jobs of B12 is to mature red blood cells. Because people who are B12 deficient are anemic. And anemia, again, it's like if you have severe breathing problems and you're not getting enough oxygen gas exchange in your lungs, and parts of the organs, the cells begin to be oxygen starved. When you're anemic, the red blood cells, the anemia, they're either you don't have enough of them or they're immature, and there are blood tests that reveal this, and they don't carry enough oxygen. So whether you've got congestion in your lungs or you're anemic, the same thing happens. Organs aren't getting the oxygen levels that they need. B12 matures those red blood cells to make sure the oxygen carrying capability of the red blood cells is present. So that's why I take trace minerals B12. And then I take tuna omega-3 for the EPA and the DHA sources of essential fatty acids for my brain and my heart. And other cells, of course, but my brain and my heart are the ones I'm the most concerned with. So, with that having been said, one of the first things I always want to know when I'm consulting with a new patient, for someone that needs nutritional advice, what do you eat? Let's start with breakfast. What do you eat for lunch? What are your snacks? What's your go-to food when you're feeling emotionally down? And we'll find out really quick what the problem is. They're malnourished. But Dr. Jack, I'm 40 pounds overweight. Yeah, that's from your malnourished condition. You've got this hidden hunger, so you keep piecing, you keep eating. And you eat the things that release the happy neurotransmitters, so you feel good. You get out of your depressed state for a little bit, eating the wrong kinds of food that continues to lead to your malnutrition, that continues to cause you to piece. Now here's how we're going to get in the way of that. So we change what they eat for breakfast. We change what they eat for dinner. And we start supplementing what they're not getting in these poor food choices. And I've seen turnarounds in less than 2 weeks in how they feel about themselves. So nutrition is so vitally important, and that's the one thing I do not miss on a daily basis. I've already taken it, is what I call the JaxPak Foundational Support. And we have decided that people want to bargain. I want to bargain when I'm dealing with something. My car, for instance, my Tesla is in the shop because the rear drive motor was starting to make some noise. When you're in an electric car, there shouldn't be any noise except for the tire noise on the road. So I started hearing this noise. I took it into Tesla. Their service guy got in the car with me. We took it out on the freeway. First thing out of his mouth was, "I never heard that before." So we go in, and fortunately, it's under warranty. Because it would be a multi-thousand-dollar expense. And I'm driving a loaner around right now, but the point I want to make is everything was going just fine until it started making a noise. When I talked to somebody about their nutritional status, everything was going just fine until they started this little pain, and they point in their gut where they feel this pain. Or everything was going just fine when I was working out, and all of a sudden I felt this movement in my back. See, everything is usually going just fine up to that point where it isn't. Now, you don't have a warranty on your body like I have on my rear drive motor in my car. But you do have a way out of these problems. And you just have to man up. I hope that's not too sexist. Man up, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, and make some changes, because a lot of these little early warning signs, if they're not listened to, and sometimes they go away, if you don't find out why it's there and what's happening, all of a sudden, bam, the big one happens. Massive heart attack that hopefully you may survive. Hopefully some of these you don't survive because you have no life afterwards. Or some major kidney dysfunction, or some major liver dysfunction. Or all of a sudden, something's happened to the brain, a stroke. I don't know why I got the stroke. Nobody in our family's ever had a stroke. Well, if you'll sit down and be quiet for a couple of minutes, I'll tell you why you had a stroke. First of all, tell me what you eat. There it is. Breakfast cereals, snacks in the middle of the day, lunch on the run, and some hastily prepared dinner. There. You're malnourished. What do you mean malnourished? I'm an American. This is America. It's 2025. What do you mean malnourished? See, these are, I've honestly believed, well, it's no big deal. I just think no child should graduate from the 6th grade without an understanding of nutrition, a basic understanding of nutrition. I would love to teach nutrition classes to 6th graders, even if it was 1 hour a week in their entire schedule. I would love to do that. I think they ought to have a basic understanding of physics, a basic understanding of chemistry, a basic understanding of the Bill of Rights, and a basic understanding of nutrition before they get out of the 6th grade. If I were king of the earth, that's one of the things that I would force on mankind. All right, I want to go on here. I've got several other things that I was going to talk about. I was asked about shedding again, what we've learned from a year of vaccine shedding data, because now we're getting the data regarding vaccine shedding. So this is one of my favorite sources, a Midwestern doctor. Some of you listen to this or subscribe to this podcast. And basically, and I'm going to quote here directly because we only got a few minutes left. Oh, I want to give out my office phone number again. It's 801-523-1890. It doesn't cost anything to sit down for a few minutes and talk. There's only a cost if you want me to take care of you. And we do about a 95-96% success. 15% of our practice comes in from out of state. In fact, I'm seeing somebody, I think this afternoon, from Las Vegas, as word gets around. So 801-523-1890, and tell them that you heard it on the radio show. So I'm quoting here, after the COVID-19 vaccines hit the market, stories began emerging of unvaccinated individuals becoming ill after being in proximity to recently vaccinated individuals. This confused many, as the mRNA technology in theory should not be able to shed. Oh yeah? After seeing countless patient cases, which can only be explained by COVID vaccine shedding a year ago, I initiated, this is a Midwestern doctor, multiple widely seen calls for individuals to share suspected shedding experiences. From those 1,500 reports, clear and replicable patterns have emerged, which collectively prove shedding is a real and predictable phenomenon that can be explained by known mechanisms unique to the mRNA technology. Likewise, after being blocked from publication for over a year, recently a scientific study corroborating the shedding phenomena was finally published. It maps out everything that is known about shedding. What are the common symptoms? How does it happen? Who does it affect? Does it occur through sexual contact? Can it cause severe issues like cancer, along with strategies to prevent it? So when doctors in this movement speaking at events about vaccines, and McCullough has said this, Malone has said this, by far the most common question is vaccine shedding a real thing? Which is understandable, as COVID-19 vaccine shedding represents the one way in which unvaccinated people are at the risk of vaccine side effects. And so they're concerned about it. Now, I know I was a victim of vaccine shedding. Can I prove it through blood tests? No. But I took care of a lady, I've talked about her before, and I can still see me in the position that it happened in room number 1 in the old office. And I don't remember who she is, but I remember what she looked like. This frail little 115-pound brunette, late 30s, early 40s. And I remember the second I touched her, something happened. I felt cold. I felt distant from myself, not out of body, just felt distant. This strong impression that something was very, very wrong. And so I went ahead and took care of her. And then I immediately went into the kitchen of the office and I took 16 of my enzymes. 16 of them. Swallowing 4 at a time, 4 times to take 16 of them. I wasn't fooling around. I didn't or wasn't all that familiar with vaccine shedding at the time, although I have read reports of it in other kinds of vaccines. where people would get polio being in proximity to someone who just got a polio vaccine while the person who got the vaccine didn't get polio. That's rare. That's extremely rare, but it's happened. But it's not extremely rare with the COVID-19. Now, I think it's critical to not publicly espouse the divisive idea of the purebloods versus the vaccinated, because that will prevent the public from coming together and helping everybody. The vaccines were marketed on the basis of division anyway, and many unvaccinated individuals thus understandably have a lot of resentment for how the vaccinated treated them at the time the vaccinated were being vaccinated and the unvaccinated were refusing it. A lot of those unvaccinated still haven't gotten over how they were treated. And we don't want to create a society of purebloods versus the vaccinated and reverse back to them the thing that they gave us, because you don't want to create unnecessary fear, but you want to be damn careful. Now, did I get sick after that? No, and I blame that on the fact that I took 16 of my own enzymes immediately. But if shedding is real, because in theory it's impossible, at least the manufacturers say that's impossible. But if it's real, it's very critical to expose those who have been recently vaccinated, not by newspaper articles and news reports on the, you know, if you know somebody that's close to you that decided to get the vaccine, I would avoid them for 2 to 3 weeks, because apparently it's the worst immediately after the inoculation. I'm serious. There was a time in the office we were kicking around when people were being scheduled to come in for, you know, a maintenance visit or a new patient or whatever else. Ask them if they'd just been recently vaccinated and tell them to wait a month. We didn't do that. But that's how seriously I was looking at this at one time. Now, Peter Corey, who I quoted last week, has spent a year trying to collect all of the data that's involved with this, and they reviewed 1,500 reports. And they found that shedding is very real. People's sensitivity to it dramatically varies. Some people can become very, very sick after being in proximity to someone, and a person standing next to them wouldn't feel anything at all, even though the vaccine shedding hit them. Most of the people who are sensitive to shedding have already figured it out anyway and know to avoid. But mechanistically speaking, shedding it's difficult to explain. But now that the evidence is there, I think there's going to be a very strong cry for further and further investigation. All right, it looks like K-Talk has gone to the news. And those of you who are on the stream, I hope this was beneficial for you today. I hope you got something out of this. There's my, if you're looking at the picture, those two white bones, the atlas and the axis, right where I do my work. And you see the brainstem dropping into the spinal cord right between those two bones. All right, it's time to go to work and see a bunch of people, and I will be back again next Wednesday for another health show, but also Monday and Tuesday to catch up on what is going on around this planet. So thank you very much on behalf of Breaking Health Barriers. I'm Dr. Jack Stockwell, and I'm going to end the stream, and we'll